a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this very, very cool episode, guys, we have Terry Tibando come by and talk about his book, his 6-volume textbook series, a citizen's disclosure on UFOs and ETI. Now, I say book because he wrote this as one large, over 3,600-page book, and then decided to break it up into a 6-volume textbook series, which is fascinating. Guys, the amount of information in here is insane. It's so comprehensive. Now, of course, 6 textbooks worth of UFO information could not be covered in this, and we will be having him back on. He's just an awesome dude. But in this one, we kind of touch a little bit on his age 5 experience that he had, as well as a history of Nazi space program, as well as he has an ET reptilian guide, which is really interesting, and then breakaway civilizations, and we talk about everything in between, guys. This is a fascinating conversation. So again, all the ways to find him located in the show notes. Make sure that you guys check that out. While you guys are down there, check out expandingrealitypodcast.com. There, we are expanding like crazy, so definitely get that link on your browser. So without any further ado, Terry Tibando. Why do Swedish warships have barcodes on the side of them?
I do not know.
So when they return back to port, they can Scandinavian. Isn't that ridiculous?
Very good. Very good.
It's ridiculous and silly, and I love stuff like that.
Yes.
So
I like silly humor, and I love irreverent humor.
Yeah, I got it.
Even though I'm somewhat a spiritual person, I don't mind jabbing, at different spiritual aspects.
You got to, and this is what makes you so well-rounded. So here we are, welcoming to the show Terry Tibando, hanging out. We're going to talk about your work. We're going to talk about your books. You are such an incredible dude. You and I have already connected over this, and I'm absolutely fascinated by what you've done for the UFO phenomena and the team of us itself, the researchers. You have offered us something incredible, and so I cannot wait for my audience to get to know you here, sir. So if you don't mind, for those that don't know too much about you, just let us know who you are, brother.
Okay, well, thank you, Brandon, for having me on your show. Really appreciate the time and the opportunity to not only promote my books, but promote myself as well. I've been involved in the UFO phenomena, researching it, reading it, being at lectures, hearing various guest speakers. I've actually hosted an event up in Vancouver back in September 9th, 2001 at the Simon Fraser University. And I had Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Carol Rosen, and Alfred L. Weber, who has a jurisprudence degree and was a part of the Jimmy Carter administration. And so I had these people up there as guest speakers, and we did the first disclosure event in Canada on the UFO phenomenon. I had all the media out there. I had the radio, TV, newspapers, very well publicized. We had about 500 people show up at Simon Fraser for this event. And this was a part of Dr. Stephen Greer's initial disclosure event that he did in Washington, D.C. back, I think it was in May 2001 at the press conference in Washington. And he had all kinds of media, and he had about 20 first-hand disclosure witnesses there. So these two people that I had, plus Dr. Greer, were part of those disclosure witnesses. And essentially, they gave presentations on their various aspects from their field of expertise as it related to the UFO phenomenon. And interestingly enough, the first hour went okay, and then they got jammed by some type of electronic signal that basically shut them down. But there were the people in the audience, and they had their own recording system, so they recorded all the speeches and talks that were going on, and it was very successful. And they figured about somewhere between 250 to maybe 500 million people heard that presentation.
Yeah, that National Press Club.
So he went around through the States and up into Canada and over into Britain with this disclosure tour. And so my team in Vancouver got together and hosted it for him, and it went over very, very well. So that's part of what I do, which is the CE5, as it is related to the CSETI movement, which is the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And as Dr. Greer used to say, this is not to be confused with SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They've got the $1 billion budget. We're operating on a shoestring. And we have the ET encounters. So we're not waiting to hear the signal. We know they're here. And if you do the right things through various protocols of or modalities of communication, which is light signals and sound, meditation, you can establish contact. Anybody can do this.
Yeah.
And I write about this in my book. In terms of my own personal experience, my first contact with ETs and my first sighting came about when I was 5 years old. And my father was in the Royal Canadian Air Force at the time. We got transferred basically from Victoria out west here to North Bay, Ontario, and then into St. Jean's, Quebec. And then we moved over into England at a Canadian air base that was there. And while in Quebec at St. Jean's, we lived on the military base in some housing. And my mother and I went out for a walk one morning. It was cold. I think it was in a November part of the month. And we were walking along, pushing my baby brother in a baby carriage. And I looked up and I saw this disc-shaped object suddenly come flying in, hover over a building. There must have been about 500 feet away, thereabouts, perfectly disc-shaped with a dome on the top, or cupola. And it was dark underneath, but very bright or silverish on the top. And I said to my mother, "What's that?" And she looked up at it and she said, "I don't know. I think it's an airplane." Now, I think that was what got me sort of interested. Was she really didn't know what it was, but she thought it was an airplane. And when she said that, the thing just took off. Now, this is a bit of an involved story, and I hope that your listeners will bear with it, but I'll try and keep it simple. And that is, in the first week we were there, my father was having a baseball game with the other servicemen on the base. And he said to my brother and I, "Would you like to come down and watch me play baseball?" So we said, "Sure, Saturday, got nothing to do. Why not?" So we went down there and we watched, and we were the only two people watching the baseball game amongst the servicemen. And we got bored very quickly. We started looking around. Now you have to understand, I'm only 5 years old at this point. I'm a twin. My brother is a twin, but we're fraternal. We're not identical. And so we're looking around. We see an aircraft on the tarmac. So we go running over towards it. And my father didn't miss us at all. He was too busy playing his game. And we came over to this strange-looking aircraft that had a swastika or a cross on it on the tail end, and it was had just two wings on the front, no rear rudders, very large tail and a tiny little propeller on the front of it. And it had a nozzle on the back end, and we looked at this thing. We ran our hands over it, and it had a sort of a camouflage. I think it was either a green camouflage or khaki camouflage paint job. We found that the canopy was open. It wasn't locked. So we flipped the canopy in over, and we took turns getting in and sitting in the seat and playing with the joystick and whatnot. And we spent a good half hour, climbing all over this aircraft, literally. And I think as a 5-year-old, you imagine yourself as a pilot, right? Now, to put this into perspective, the fact that I saw this UFO that was disc-shaped that reminded me of a Mexican sombrero hat. I connected this up with our current activity with this airplane. Here's two 5-year-olds who probably, if these were small ET beings watching us, they could easily relate to us being short-statured. I don't know what they were in terms of when we saw their craft. And then a day or two later, after that particular event, and this aircraft is known as the Messerschmitt 163E Comet. It's the only rocket plane that existed at that time. And it flew during the Second World War, and it was, when it did fly successfully, it was lethal. And it downed a number of large aircraft that flew over into Germany on their bombing runs. And basically it would take off, it would drop its front wheels and take off and go straight up. And they had to time this just correctly so that when the bombers were coming in range, they would take off and then dive down. They would get up to speeds of 600 miles an hour. And there wasn't any other aircraft that could deal with it. And by the time they get off a round of return fire, the plane was already gone. And so if the German pilots were successful, they got 2 attack runs on the squadron that they were facing. Normally they would only get one if their takeoff was too early, but they, when they made their attack run, they only have enough fuel to get back to their airport. Now, the thing about this is that gave them 15 or 20 minutes of flight time. And then they had to return. And if they ran out of fuel, the plane was designed as a glider. It could glide back in. It would glide sort of nose up with the one wheel on the tail end, so that it basically would come in, touch down on that rear wheel, and then gently land on the front of the fuselage of the craft. Now, that's a little history of the German technology. A couple of days later, after having looked at this, I had ETs come into my bedroom.
And I know you were 5, but what year was this for everybody else?
1953. Okay. This is before they were even talking about grays.
Right.
Okay. And I'll be honest with you that the term grays is rather racist. And in this day and age, when we're trying to be very sensitive to other cultures and labeling, what we're doing is transferring our prejudice over onto an alien species that we know nothing about. People say they know. In all my years of experience of encountering different ETs, not one of them has come up and said, "Terry, we want to give you some information."
Huh.
Not one. The only information I ever got from them was, "Keep up the good work." That was it.
Well, and I'm sure we're going to get to it. Then you obviously had other interactions, but there was no communication with them that
yeah. And if there were, it's telepathic. Because quite frankly, if they know English, that's great. If they knew German, that would be great, or any other language, that would be great, because now you have a verbal communication. But in the types of communication I had, it's all telepathic. It wasn't verbal.
How did it appear
That's
in
not-
your, was it words in your head or pictures and images and emotions? How
It was like you talking to me.
So you
That-
could hear
that's-
basically
I
English
could hear
with a
words.
monologue.
I could hear words, not necessarily images. I've actually communicated with a reptilian type of ET that looked like a gecko lizard. And if you know what a gecko lizard looks like, it's like yellow with dark brown spots all over it.
Yeah, and they come from the Draco constellation, right? That's the
Well,
Dracos.
that's what they claim, but there's no proof of it.
Right? I mean, this is the thing, right? Everybody, all
That's
of them
the
could be
point.
lying to you. Yeah.
That's right. And you have to understand something. And this, we're going to get into this because it's all in my book. The problem here is, given that we're still an immature species, we're at this point in our social spiritual evolvement where we are moving out of adolescence and moving into mature adulthood. And because of that, they're not ETs being, we give them the perspective that they're very intelligent, more so than we are, and perhaps more socially, spiritually, politically evolved than we are. And so why would they come here and tell us where they're from, knowing what we are right now,
Yeah.
where we already have developed space travel? We've sent astronauts, cosmonauts, and sent them to the moon, and we sent spacecraft out into the solar system to look at the planets and their moons. And we have atomic weapons, lasers, scalar weapons. Do you really think they're going to tell us and say, "Oh yeah, I come from Draco," or "I come from Zeta Reticuli"?
Yeah, that's
Because
like
we're
saying
going to be
go.
knocking on their door
Right.
one day and saying, "Hi, you remember us? We like your planet. Can we move in?" Not likely. And we have to start rethinking our space exploration imperative. Are we going to go out there and settle planets with humans on it? Or are we going to discover, which I believe there's a lot of intelligent life all over the place, even if it's just an amoeba or it's plant life or rudimentary animal life or even intelligence? And if there's intelligence, do you think they're going to say, "Oh yeah, come on in, bring the family and the friends and set up shop"?
Oh, it didn't work out for the indigenous people here in the United States, so probably not.
Exactly. And any time in, like, whether it's in Canada, United States, Central America, or South America, when Europeans came over, they mistreated and segregated and tried to wipe out the indigenous culture that was here. And that's not the kind of attitude that we want to see going off into space. And we still have that mentality. We're like a virus. Unfortunately, until we grow up and mature, we're going to be a threat to any other intelligent species. Now, the ones that are trying to reach out today through CE5 groups and what have you are trying to present the best of humanity. That we're not just apes out of the tree, and we're not running around with clubs and whatever, and we're not going to be harming you. Do we have an attitude of fight or flight response? Yes, we do. But we also have the ability to reason. And if we reason things out and approach it in a manner that says, "Look, I got to find out more about what it is, who it is, what they want, why they're here, all the rest of it," then we're starting to take a more rational approach to things. If we go out with guns blazing, tossing missiles, shooting with lasers, or using high particle beams and scalar weapons, that's not a welcome sign. That's a sign with a big notice saying, if you come to this planet, you take your life in your own hands, because the inhabitants are hostile and aggressive. And we have to prove otherwise. And so, and I've gotten off my own original experience, but I'm trying to set up this picture that we have to look at this whole phenomena. It's not just UAPs and UFOs. And UAPs is just another nomenclature for UFOs, and they know what these are. They're not unidentified. They're identified. They've known about this since the Second World War, because they've been buzzed over their own ships, both Axis and Allied. They've buzzed Allied and Axis aircraft, and both sides didn't know who these were. Now, there were some man-made craft flying around that were disc-shaped, and the Nazi aspect of Germany had those as a secret weapon. This is what Hitler was always talking about, the Wunderwaffen.
Wunderweapon. Yeah.
Yeah. The secret, very highly advanced weapons that could end the war within a week. It could have, if he had the means to get it all out there. And these Haunebu craft, which are disc-shaped, they went through a number of various versions of this, from the Vril to the Haunebu to a craft that were fairly large in size. And they did fly. And there are photographs of them in flight with conventional aircraft in the background, whether they were German or Allied aircraft. The thing is that not many people know, even up to this day and age, that the Germans had this. But the powers that be in the military and the intelligence agencies, whether it was in Britain, France, Russia, or in the United States, they knew that they had something there, and they knew they had missiles that could fly and hit London, and they knew that they had missiles ready to target New York in the States, and that they had Putumayo, where they were developing these rockets and other advanced aircraft. And the whole purpose of Operation Paperclip, which was the American program to get into Germany before the Russians, get hold of all the technology, get hold of all the scientists. 1,500 Nazi scientists came back to the southwestern United States and set up the American space program, including some of this advanced stuff. And the whole thing behind this then is that there was man-made craft that looked like flying saucers, known as Haunebu or Haunebu 2. They went through 1, 2, and 3, and whatever. You can see, you can Google this and you can find pictures and diagrams of this. They asked the Germans how they developed this, and they said, and I think one of the people they spoke to was Hermann Oberth, and he said, we had help. And he said, from whom? He said, from them, pointing upward. In other words, back in, I think it was 1936, there was a crash in the Black Forest in Bavaria of an unidentified craft, and the beings on board survived. And these are the beings that helped the Nazi regime, develop the spacecraft. And of course, from all of that, we've got all kinds of rumors of what allegedly they could do with this craft. That they allegedly went to the moon and set up a base and all the rest of it. But when they talk about who were the first people out in space, it wasn't the Americans. The Germans had people who went out into space, didn't necessarily survive the trip, but they sent them up there. And they sent them up in conventional type rockets. The first photograph of the Earth was from a German Nazi photograph, proving that they had developed that. They were testing subjects. Usually they were Jewish prisoners, to see what the effects of the vacuum of space would do on excessive heat. All kinds of really barbaric and cruel tests to find out what would happen to the human body. A lot of that information went to the Americans, and it went to the Russians, and the other nations like Britain got some information. Canada got some information. That's why we ended up with this aircraft, the Messerschmitt 163E Comet, in Canada, and I figured out how they got it there. They put it on, they brought it over on a ship, put it on a barge, and there's a river that sails right by the airbase, and they unloaded it right from there onto the airbase. And that's why my brother and I were able to see this aircraft that we probably shouldn't have seen.
Wow. Do you think Hellier found some of that out, and that's why he was so outspoken?
Yeah, and now I'm going to tell you something. You have to understand that he had his own experiences and he had his own thoughts, and he got information from the military. But Dr. Greer informed him about a lot of things that he didn't know about. And consequently, a lot of his thinking up before he passed away came from that interview with Dr. Stephen Greer. However, he got it from also a lot of other information. Myself, and I've met Paul Hellier. He's a very tall man. I had to do my own digging and research into all of this information in order to pull out what Greer kind of knows and what some of the other people out there know. And, some people say, well, how do you know it's real or factual and all the rest of it? And I said, well, I look at the people who present it, look at their credentials, their respectability. Did they write a book? Was it well received? Did they have pertinent information in it? All of that. So I had to look for the best sources of information available in order to utilize that in writing my book. Now, I've been sitting on this information for years and years, and it wasn't until around 2009 that I began to say, I think I could write this book. I had no idea how big it was going to be. I figured it would be about 200, maybe 300 pages, and that's what I was aiming for. And then suddenly it was 400, 600, 1,000 pages, 1,800 pages, and I thought, where am I getting all this stuff? And all of a sudden it bloomed out into 3,600 pages. It was written as one book. And I had to break it up into 6 volumes, and they're big volumes. And you look in the back of my library, and those books on the bookshelf, the tallest ones are my books, and they're fairly thick. The thickest one is about 2 inches, and it weighs 6.5 pounds. God. And a lot of them are like that, between 5 and 6.5 pounds. Now, getting back to my story of how I met with ETs, they found me. I didn't go looking for them. They found me. And I believed at that time that ETs, because we just came out of a war, and I was born in 1948, so the war ended 3 years earlier. Roswell happened a year before I was born, maybe a year and a half almost. And all of a sudden, I get this encounter, and these beings that I saw, I would describe as short, ghost-like. When I say that, like Casper the Ghost.
Like transparent?
Not transparent. They were solid.
Translucent?
As I look at you, that's how solid they are. Okay. However, the impression they gave me was that they were ghosts, but like little men, and they moved right through the wall. So that apparitional aspect made me think of a ghost, because at that time I was reading Casper the Ghost and things like that. And that's what reminded me about these beings. They were bright and luminous. They appeared probably white, had very large eyes, like a human, not black wraparound eyelids.
Do you remember what color?
Their eyes?
Yeah.
I would say that they may have been blue or they may have been brown, but if you look at my eyes, you see a pupil, you see color. I look at your eyes, that's what I saw, but much larger, probably 2 or 3 times the size. And their height was probably like possibly a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, right?
Okay.
They came through the wall behind the bedroom door, and it freaked me out. And I didn't know what I was looking at, but they were coming right through the wall. And I called out for my mother. I was getting very panicky and feeling very upset that I had ghosts in my bedroom. And she comes in and she said, "What's going on?" You know, and I said, "There's little men behind the door." And she said, "What?" I said, "There's little men behind the door." And she goes and looks at she says, "There's nothing there. You're having a bad dream, a nightmare." And I said, "But I saw them. They were there. They were coming right through the wall." And she just probably thought, "What the hell is this kid saying?" You know. So she calms me down and she leaves the room. And my twin brother is sleeping off on my right side in his bed, and the youngest brother at the time was sleeping in a baby crib. He was only about maybe 1 years old. So there was one room for the kids and then one room for the adults, and this was the military housing that they gave us. And she leaves the room, and damn, these things show up again. They're right there. Now I'm really panicking. I'm screaming. I'm carrying on. I'm waking up the household. She comes running back in, and I can tell she's annoyed. And she says, "What's going on? Why are you carrying on?" She said, "They're back." And again, she takes another look, and they're not there. So in between the time that I'm calling her, they move back through the wall. And she's saying, "I think you're having a bad dream. There's absolutely nothing there." And so she spends about 5 or 10 minutes settling me down. I think I woke up my brothers. Obviously, my father must have been awakened by me, but she calms me down. She says, "Look, Christmas is not too far away. Think of all the presents, the nice presents you're going to get. Try to think of something positive, you know." A very motherly female reaction to a situation, which is great. And she said, "Now, I want you to dream something nice. No more crying, no more carrying on." She leaves, and I look and I don't see anything. And I thought, "Oh, okay, well, maybe I'm dreaming." Boom, they're back. This is the third time, and this time I'm mustering the courage not to yell and scream and carry on. And I'm watching these things, and they're walking along the bottom of the bed and then up the side of the bed towards me. And I pull the covers over my head, thinking that in a typical 5-year-old logic, if I don't see them, they can't see me, they're not there.
Also T-Rex logic. I'm led to believe that's Tyrannosaurus Rex logic as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I fell asleep. But there's something in the back of my mind that says that those covers came off me. Now, I have no memory after that. Was I abducted from the bedroom? I can't say. And in my mind, I wasn't abducted. However, when I woke up the next morning, of course, I was being teased by my brother, and my mother was saying, "You just had a bad dream." But I had an inwardly knowing that there was more to the universe than I realized, that there was life in the universe besides us. And I was drawing pictures of stars and planets and rockets and things like that. And that's a lot for a 5-year-old to suddenly start doing. So that was my first introduction to the phenomenon. Then throughout my life, I had definite paranormal experiences that were not related to ufology, but they were interesting enough. I've had some psychic ability off and on. It's not there when I want it, but when it does happen, it's unexpected and it suddenly happens. I've had premonitions. I've had remote viewing where it was accurate. I've had telepathic communication, and with an individual, a friend of mine who's since passed away, and I asked him about it, and he tried to be cagey about it, but he said, "No, I was thinking." what you were telling me. Like whatever you were picking up, I wasn't saying anything. I was thinking it. And then I had that with an ET where I was trying to reach out, and the only thing I got from them was I was out in the field by myself, fiddling with my laser, trying to get it to work. And I saw this bright light go over, and it said, "Keep up the good work."
You heard, you felt in your head, keep up the good?
In my head, that's what they said. Keep
As
up
it flew by?
work. As they flew by.
Damn.
And then when I had a remote view of this reptilian type of ET being, I was asking for an ET guide, because Dr. Greer said, ask the ETs and see if they will act, one of them will act as your guide. So I did this, and I saw this reptilian being. Now, if you give me a moment, I can show you a picture of that.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'd love to see a picture.
I have to do a share screen.
Yes.
Screen.
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can pull that up, because I did open up my page on this, and okay. I don't know if this is going to show up or not.
Yeah, let's have a look. You do have the ability to share as well.
Yeah, I'm just.
That's fascinating. I think it's so wild that it just drove by and said, "Keep up the good work." Did it sound?
Yeah, that was it. I've got it on my screen, but I don't think. Just a minute. I have to. Oh, okay. There we go. I need to find that. So let's see. I want to share. Yep.
Cool.
I think I just diminished you.
Oh, it happens. Yeah, when you share, we go off to the side and we can see your desktop.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you what. I'll show you a different link.
Yeah, guys, check the show notes for sure. His books are incredible. You just grabbed one. It's amazing you could lift that by yourself. That's insane. I think it's massive.
I don't know if that is coming through. If that's too close or too far.
Oh yeah, the symbol on the side of your book. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
That's what I drew, and I showed that to Dr. Greer, and he said, "Yeah, I've seen that type of being." So I got a confirmation that it wasn't just me imagining things. Huh. That was the ET being that I connected with. And I said to him, I'm Terry Tibando. I'm here doing a, C5 encounter with you people. I said, do you have a name? And he said, yes, HGN. And I thought, HGN, that's an unusual name.
Yeah.
And it made no sense to me. And I had to think about this, and I wrote it down, HGN. And he said he would be my guide, I guess, for the time that I was down there. And when I thought about this afterwards, maybe it was because he was reptilian that I was mispronouncing the words or his name, and that I had to think of it in terms of a guttural reptilian type voice.
Did you come up with one?
Yes.
Okay, let's have it.
Onna.
Wow.
It's HGN, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting that some ETs will actually give their name. I haven't heard of anybody saying, oh, yeah, I come from that planet over beside the star system's Zeta Reticuli, or I come from the Lyra system, or I come from Draconia, Alpha Centauri, or whatever. Because, as I said earlier, I don't think that they want us right now, given that we have the ability to reverse engineer some of their spacecraft that will travel as fast or faster than the speed of light and can reach their star system in no time. They don't want us showing up. And in many ways, we've been told that we're a quarantined species on this planet. Now, I can prove that both spiritually, and I can prove it both through experience and the experience of who we are as a species. And I write about this in the book. And I should say books.
Yeah, I like how you call it the book because that's how you wrote it, but you
That's
just
how I
split
wrote
it up
it.
for us, right? Yeah, that's incredible.
And so when I wrote this, I was 1,800 pages, and I sent a note to Dr. Greer saying, well, I just finished, or I'm writing a book and it's 1,800 pages. And he says, oh my God.
Yeah, you need to pluralize that word. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, that's amazing. And of course, since I sent that information to him, I've written the other 1,800 pages to it. And it took me 2 years to proofread everything that I had done and edited and all the rest of it. And even though I've done that at least twice using different programs, I had to rely on my own knowledge of the English language and realize that there's a lot of Americanization of the English language that is really not the best way of writing English. It may be more abbreviated, but I tend to favor the British and what the Canadians use. We use a little bit of both, to try and communicate. But I can understand when the British say they spell program, it will be PROGRAMME. Whereas we will drop the M and the E on the end of that word. And so when I was writing the book, I had to sort of look at it and how do I speak and how do I communicate so that people understand what I'm saying? And that's how I wrote the book. So if you pick it up, it would almost seem like somebody's talking to you, not just putting out a bunch of words, right?
Yeah.
And as I went through it, I came up with a lot of original thoughts and ideas that I don't know where they came from. I figured I had an angel on one side and an ET on the other side.
And a reptilian ET over there, bang.
Yeah, whatever. We're being visited by more than one or two species. Dr. Paul Hellyer, I should say, said there was at least 4. I've heard of up to 56 different species given by Cliffordson, I think, or Clifford.
Yeah, and Craig Campabazio wrote a book, Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, and we're going through it on the Expansive Insiders over here with a friend of mine, and there's hundreds in there. I mean, it's a ton.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. You're going to get a lot of that cannot be proven. That's the problem. This is going to be more anecdotal based on a personal perspective, and they're going to inject what they think, where they're from, what they're called, all the rest of it. I have yet to have one ET in the 69 years of my life, or at least experiencing, tell me who they are. We call ourselves nobody's told me that, and not that I'm not interested.
So much of it is subjective, which is what I've found with this. And you can absolutely agree with this, that no two real experiences are identically alike. Even people that get abducted or contacted and brought onto the same UFO will have 2 completely different experiences, and they've reported this. So what's interesting is the subjectivity of the contact phenomenon. And I think that's why it's so pervasive, because it has to be so personal to you for you to get it. So maybe some of these folks have experienced that. I have no idea. Now, I think it's also interesting because proving my point here is what happened, what you experienced when you were 5. You were studying Casper, you're 5 years old, for God's sakes, and, these bright beings about Casper size with big eyes, human eye. I mean, I'm just visualizing Casper because that's what they want you to visualize. And so, again, it's very subjective. Some people see them as demons and angels. Some people interpret them as grays, or like a myriad of things that Craig Campabazio got a hold of and were able to kind of say, hey, here's another thing I experienced. And this is what's so fascinating about it. It seems like they keep popping up all the time. We went, from 4 to 11 to 300 in no time, it seems.
I heard at one time 126, and now you're saying about 300. So it doesn't surprise me. And, when I wrote my books, I used a quote from the Baha'i faith, from the prophet Baha'u'llah. That's Baha'u'llah. And basically what he says, and he's the prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith for this day and age that we live in. Every age has a prophet of one kind or another that show up approximately every 1,000 years, give or take. And he's the most recent. And he said, know thou that for every fixed star, and by fixed star he means stable star, it hath its planets, and every planet hath its creatures, whose number no man can compute. Now, what that says to me is that if the star system is not in a proto state, and I've taken astronomy, that used to be my major at university. I did a lot of study of the sciences and math and physics and that sort of thing, and astronomy was my major. And what I understand is that a proto-star system is a newly formed system. Its sun is reaching a point of stabilization, but the planets are still swirling around the star in the form of chunks and gases and particles and whatnot. And so they haven't coalesced into a bowl spherical shape. And when they finally do, and most of everything has settled, life begins to emerge in that star system. And it will appear on all planets or bodies within that system, whether it's moons or whether it is an actual planet, which then brings up the possibility that we may not know how it would have formed, what it will look like. Will it even resemble anything we are familiar with on Earth, or go off in some other direction? It will evolve, and it will either have a very simplified life form. It may be plant, it may be aquatic, it may be avian. It could be intelligent. We don't know. In fact, as we move out into the universe as a species exploring, we may encounter extraterrestrial life for which we will not even recognize. That is a problem. And one of the quotes I read, and can be supported by science, and this comes from the Baha'i writings, is that in the element radium, which is a highly radioactive material, there is, they have found life on it, microbes and bacteria, and proving that even in those hostile conditions, life can emerge. Now we know this is termed exophile or xenophile.
Extremophile.
Or extremophile.
Yeah.
And what that means is that it can live in adverse conditions that are adverse to us as humans, right? But they can survive, whether down at the bottom of the oceans or in the ice or 200 or 300 feet into the ground. Life can exist there. Now, given that statement that there's life on radium, there is an abundance of radium in most stars.
Does that mean
Connect the dots.
stars have life?
Stars have life on it. Now,
do you think that that's where the life comes from, is the star itself?
I do not know. I can't answer that question because I don't have enough information. But if stars are the basis from which all other life evolves from, I mean, the Egyptians worshipped the sun.
Yeah.
And they weren't talking about a spiritual sun, but a physical sun.
Yeah.
Other cultures had a similar belief. Now, it is possible that as life emanates out from, say, the star and forms planets as it cools and coalesces, that life will have developed. Carl Sagan said it best. We are star stuff. We are the stuff of stars, right? And therefore, that too is an agreement from science with a spiritual concept.
Yeah.
And so it is very possible and conceivable that there's life on stable stars. but we may not know what it is. However, and again, this is some of my research. NASA, with its SOHO and stereo satellites that orbit in around the sun and photographing the sun all the time and under various conditions and circumstances, have found very, very large spacecraft around the sun.
It's so crazy. So I had Mary Joyce on the show. She wrote a book, Spy in the Sky, and it's all about satellite photos. And one of the sections includes some that she has dubbed the Isis Palace, and I believe the Phoenix as well. And they're these massive, I mean, they're like thousands of miles.
They're actually planet-sized spacecraft.
Yeah, yeah.
And the interesting thing is some of them are what we would refer to as cube or Borg-shaped square. Some look like discs. Some look like, I can't even describe.
Like a jelly. There's like a jellyfish one.
Yeah. And some with various tubes and appendages on them. And interestingly enough, out around Saturn, they have photographed these large spacecraft. And if you were to read Norman Bergram's book, The Ringmakers of Saturn.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
I happen to.
Do you have a copy? I said if you can find
I've downloaded a copy.
That's one that's been on my list. That any listener can buy me that and send it to me. I would love that.
It's worth a couple of $1,000.
Yeah, I know, right? And and if you could find one, it's insane. So it's called The Ringmakers of Saturn. I'm fascinated by it.
And it's only about 150 pages, if that. But it's got a lot of interesting information as well as NASA photographs, and it shows two large spacecraft actually forming the ring of Saturn, or at least part of it, because part of the ring is sort of cut off, and you see these two things off on one side, and it looks like they're spraying out something into it to form a ring. Now, again, this Norman Bergram is a genius photographic analyst who worked for NASA. So if he worked for NASA, they know this guy is legit and on the up and up. And that was his interpretation based on what he saw in the photographs. It's no different than when you're a country flying, say, during the war, or even now, flying over another country, and you're photographing what's on the ground. You have to be able to interpret what you're seeing, even if it's fake. You have to know the difference between fake and real. And that's why the sophistication of photography isn't just click, click, click. It's they're taking photographs in ultraviolet and infrared and other ranges that will pick up whether or not that's a solid object or whether it is an inflated object or whatever. So the thing is, when somebody tells you that this is what they're seeing out in space, and it appears to be forming the rings of Saturn, then it calls into question, well, I thought they were all natural particles that are just, like from a moon that never formed, and it's just whizzing around the planet, right? But scientists said, well, it's made up of ice and rock, small rock, right? And that the largest might be the size of a house, something like that. So, I mean, I don't know how they get that interpretation, but somehow they do. The Cassini space probe has photographed that, and it's shown that there's probably at least 100 different rings within each ring, going closer towards the center, and then there's a boundary where there is nothing there but the planet. And that the rings extend out further than they realize from the planet. It actually goes out maybe 2 or 3 times further out. And when they photograph back, you can start to see these other rings that they didn't know existed that were there. Wow. So this is where true science from NASA comes into play, which is then something that is very credible and is worthy of disclosure and informing the public about. It advances science, particularly astronomy. So I have some of that in one of my books. And as I say, I downloaded that book off of the internet.
It's
I just
incredible. Well,
Yeah.
and I do want to point out here, I do have a question about that, but I do want to point out here that you did let me in on volume 1 here, and it's fascinating. I didn't know that there were so many different of the Columbian planes, the little artifacts that were found, little golden ones with the aft wing in the back that resemble modern day aircraft. I thought there was just the one, and they made, or a handful of them. The picture you have in there has dozens of these things. They were all over the place, which is fascinating. Yeah. So to the rings again, and to these huge ships that we're seeing, this is my question. Do you think that they're exclusively ships, or do you think that it's the potential for some of these things to be entities or beings themselves?
Well, Norman Bergram says that we have to get past this concept of size.
Yes.
And by that, I suspect there are things so gigantic in size, particularly life forms out in space, that we would appear as an insect or an amoeba.
Our planet may appear that way to these things.
Yeah. And you know, when you look at the microverse, which is atoms and electrons and protons, and then deeper in the what do you call it? I was going to use quasars, but that's the other direction. Upness, downness, strangeness, all these things that are subatomic, right? Very, very small. And the point is that there is no end to the microverse. No matter how much you could shrink down or photograph, it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. That's just the nature of reality. You go in the opposite extreme, and what we see in our own solar system is planets bigger than the Earth. And we see our sun that is really huge. Then we move outside and we look at other stars. And our star compared to some of the others, like I think it's Cygnus Y or something like that, Cygni Y, is so huge, our sun would look like a speck.
Yeah. I've seen that when they do the one next to ours, and then they zoom out and they scale everything up and they leave ours there, and I'm like, oh, it's sad. It's mind blowing, man. It's
called the scale of 10, and what it is, and you can download that. It's on YouTube. It's whatever, you can find it. And what's interesting is that if you were to take a commercial jet and fly around, say, the largest sun or star that they have found so far, it would take you nearly 1,000 years to get around it once. Now, that's just traveling at, say, maybe 700, 900 miles an hour. That's how long it would take you. I came up with something that I think even astronomy hasn't yet acknowledged. And I'm putting it out there, and I'm putting my head on the chopping block when I say this, that there are stars so large in size, and they're closer towards the center of most galaxies, that they are literally light years in size.
Yeah, that's
in other words, between 5 to 10 to maybe 50 or 100 light years in size. Now, when you look towards the center of the galaxy, you wouldn't necessarily see that at all. One of the problems is it's very, very bright at the center. And yet, scientists will say that at every center is a black hole, and that it sucks in matter. Well, then there's a bit of a disconnect here, and I'm still trying to figure this out, even though I took astronomy and physics and all the rest of it. If you have a black hole and it sucks in material, then how can it be bright? In other words, if there's a void in space that sucks in material, stars, whatever else, then conversely or obversely, on the other side of the coin, there has to be a region in space where there's just a massive explosion or a massive brightness appearing, which is the birth of something. Now, there is the birth of stars, and they can tell that. There is the birth of cloud dust and whatnot. They know that. So the yin and the yang is a possibility in astronomy. However, even though they said they photographed a black hole, I'm still scratching my head over it. I haven't said it doesn't exist, but I need a lot more proof than just a photograph, or that Stephen Hawking said that this is a black hole. Because you have to have something on the other end of the spectrum of that in order to, the universe has to be in balance. It can't be just sucking stuff out of existence if it isn't putting something back into existence.
Can be created or destroyed, right?
Right. Yeah. That's it. And that's the basic law of physics. That you can neither create nor destroy, and that what you can do is transition or change it from one thing to another. But in fact, scientists do agree that all material physical reality is nothing more than energy. So when we look at each other, what are we seeing? We're seeing through organs and through sensory organs that there's something there, but it's very limited. And somebody says what we see is like a tiny spectrum of reality. And that's a good analogy, because when we look at the spectrum of light, you got this section in the middle that has color, and that's what we pick up. We can't see the infrared, we cannot see the ultraviolet, we cannot see radio waves or the X-rays and gamma rays and all the other, but we can photograph those, or we can pick up on those energies with instruments, and it will be the same thing. It's like, how small is small? It wasn't until we developed the electron microscope could we see right down to a molecule and even an atom. And they've actually done now experiments where they can write on an atom a word or two.
What did they write?
Oh, I don't know. Or they can line up the atoms to spell out a word.
That's
I mean,
cool.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy what science can do. But if we can do that, imagine an intelligence out there that can have spaceships so large that they can literally move at least small planets or moons around and put them into orbit or not. Which also now begs this other question. Is our moon an artificial satellite, or is it natural?
And you read my mind on. I mean, that's the question, right? And then you think about rogue planets and all kinds of things like that. And maybe that one of the planets they drug off, they just kind of wait for it to all die off after a few thousand years of dragging it for a while, and then they send the team in to hollow it out and get to work, and then put it in our orbit. I love the hollow moon stuff.
I mean, like, that theory is as good as any out there. However, what's interesting in our own human history, there are cultures that said there was a time when the moon did not exist.
Yeah.
And they figured that was roughly around 13 to 15,000 years ago. Up until that point, beyond that time, there was no moon, which means that the moon's been there for maybe 15,000, I will even say 20,000 years.
Which also calls in the question, our dependency on it, and the life on this planet's dependency on it. Because every time you talk about the moon, we got to have it, or the life would just end on this. It controls the tides and all that stuff. And there's a lot of cultures that were able to scribble down or chisel into something that they'd live for quite a while just fine without the moon. So that'd be the question I would ask.
Yeah. And so when you start to look at the moon, like there's an interesting crater on the moon called Orientalis. And when you look at it, it is a crater that has like 3 concentric rings to it. Now, the interesting thing about it, and it's probably the largest crater on the moon, and most of it is on the side that we can't see. But what's interesting is you go to the other moons, like particularly in around Saturn, there's at least 4 moons that basically I call the cookie cutter moons. They all look the same. They all got this large crater on it that is at least 3 levels of cratering within it. And according to Norman Bergram, he said that these giant spacecraft that are so large have like these long extension tubes that come out, and they kind of go, and they can pick up the moon and start to move it. And now, is that a possibility? I can't say. I don't have the science, but he's saying that's what he thinks is happening, and that's why they all got similar markings on the side of their, or at least on one side of their sphere. And then you look at our moon, and we got it similar. Now, the difference is when you look at all the moons and you compare them in terms of size to planet ratio, most of the moons are like 0.0025% of the size of the planet. Ours is 0.25 the size of our planet.
Yep.
Very unusual to have a planet that's a quarter the size of our own planet. And it's ideal because it allows it to be eclipsed by the sun, or that we can eclipse the moon and that sort of thing. And the interaction, as you stated, of the tidal action and all of those things that come into being. And if the moon is artificial and was brought here by who knows where, then somebody knew something about the planet and what this would do or not do to it. And I'm going down a field, like I haven't even touched my first book yet. I'm just giving you generalized information. We'll get into it. Hopefully we've got a lot of time. But when you look at the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, it's made up of a lot of material. And people said, there's so much material there must have been another planet there. And that is the remnants of it. Tom van Vlaanderen speculated and hypothesized that this is the exploded planet theory, that there was a planet 5 or planet V or whatever you want to call it. Some people say, well, that was Marduk, according to Zachariah Sitchin.
Yeah.
And whatever name it was given, there seems to be a reality that it was there. Now, interestingly enough, within that asteroid belt are two moons that are perfectly spherical, one more so than the other, Ceres and Vesta. And when you look at Ceres, that's C-E-R-E-S, and Vesta, they're about, I think it's 500 or 600 kilometers in size, roughly. And Vesta has a surface on it, not too dissimilar to our moon, but it also has features like a large, what they call cryovolcanic area, a large pimple, as you would explain it. And I spotted that the first time they brought out the NASA photographs, because I was watching this and I thought, oh, there's something odd about that. And I slowed it down and looked at it and blew it up, and I realized I was looking at a mountain that stands out like a sore thumb on this moon, or what they call a giant asteroid. No, it's not an asteroid. It's a moon, is what it is. Science and NASA have yet to figure this out. But I'm looking at what I say is obvious. When you have asteroids flying around, they're all irregular shapes, and they don't necessarily form into round coalesced spheres. You got at least two of them. Vesta is a little more jagged, but it's still spherical. But there's something on the one side of Ceres that is very bright and luminous, even when it's in the dark, which means it's not getting any solar radiation or light hitting from. If the light is coming in from this side, on the other side is the brightness, which means how can it be bright on one side when there's no light there? It can't be a reflection. It's called an albedo. Like when we look at the moon, we say it has an albedo number of XX, whatever. When they look at this brightness on this side has an albedo that should not even register. So that means there's something there that's very bright. And they're saying, well, there's probably another type of cryovolcanic anomaly, which is made up of ice. So a cryo volcano is an ice volcano. But even if that were true, you still would not see it, because you need to have light reflecting off it. And where's that light coming from? So when you finally get pictures showing that crater, you start to see structure within that crater that, in my opinion, is artificial. But again, you get the people on the other side of the coin saying, I don't think so. I think this is all natural. You know, it's like saying, well, the face on Mars is just a natural phenomena of light and shadow. No, the European Space Agency has flown over it and they said, that's a face. That's not natural. And then when you got pyramids nearby, again, that's not natural. Well, then they're saying, well, how do you explain the pyramids of finding in the Antarctic? You know, we still don't know whether they are mountains or whether they are pyramids. Until we get past the ice, we'll be able to know for certainty. So the educated speculation is that that's a pyramid. Well, if you're going to give that kind of educated opinion about something that's covered with ice, why is it that you cannot give an educated opinion about what's there that's not covered with ice?
Yeah, it's a perfectly good question to ask. Yeah.
Right. So, in other words, if you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. And I always say, and I write about this in the book, people need to ask the hard questions. When you start to ask the hard questions, it isn't like, is there, but rather, what is there not?
Yes. Yes.
In other words, if you played Clue, that game board, asking, getting an answer will tell you something. But if you don't sort of not ask the question, that also reveals information.
Right.
And what I found is when I played that game, I'll always win it every time, because I figured out the strategy of playing the game, which is ask the question and then look at what's not being answered and then find out who is not answering.
Yeah.
Right. And then you figure it out. So it's the same thing. And it's the same way in any good detective agency or police work. You got to know not just what you're asking, but what you're not asking and how people are responding to it or not responding.
Yeah, it's just like whenever you hear them talk about the alien spaceships that they've seen, sort of the Nimitz thing, and by they, I mean the military on the news, which is how it's been phrased, which is something I'd like to talk to you about. Then they're always talking about that they don't think that they're a threat. They're not saying that they're not real or that they don't know what they are. They're saying that they don't think they're a threat. So, you know, take whatever you want from that, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist or that they don't know what they are. You know what I mean? It's same to your point, same to exactly what you're saying.
Well, yeah. Okay, let's touch on that. I have my own perceptions of this, and that is, we know since Roswell, 1947, that they've been reverse engineering alien spacecraft. If we look at the Gerardo incident of 1941 or 42. That craft that came down where they saw a body and a minister came out and gave a final right blessing over the body, then they knew that even before the war ended, they were already dealing with extraterrestrial spacecraft. So for the military to say we don't know what they are is a bold-faced lie. They know exactly what they are. They don't want to come out and tell you because we're not capable of being rational and mature enough to handle the information. You cannot handle the truth, as it was said in A Few Good Men.
We're not capable of going to a football game together without somebody getting stabbed in the parking lot for wearing the wrong color jersey. So I don't disagree with the sentiment, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
and I also want to ask you something to that, but please continue.
Yeah, okay. So the thing is, some of us can handle the truth. There are others that can't handle the truth. Why? Because they're stuck on old paradigms of thinking. And until they get past that, they're always, it's like being stuck in grade 2 and loving and worshiping your teacher, and whether it's a man or a woman, and they've always been kind and they taught you wonderful things, and you don't want to move out of grade 2. But the problem is, there's other grades, and the teachers tell you that you've learned all that I can teach you. You must now go into the next grade level.
Yeah, it's like the movie Van Wilder. Have you ever seen that with Ryan Reynolds? It's an older movie. It's fun. It's a fun movie. It's a national.
I may have. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's like in the same family. It's National Lampoon, so it's silly, you know. But basically, the whole premise it begins. He doesn't leave college, like he didn't want to leave because he's stuck there. He's scared to face the world, right? And of course, spoiler alert: at the end, he figures out and it all works out.
Well,
but
religion's the same way.
Yeah, good point. Damn good point.
Yeah, you know, and I hate to tell people, and if they're Christian, look, I have no problem with whatever religion you believe in. But be the best Christian you are. Be the best Jew. Be the best Muslim. Be the best Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Hindu, whatever. Be the best at your morality, your spirituality, because it all comes from the same source. As a Baha'i, I try to teach that to everybody. Be the best at your religious belief. No, don't just jump on the bandwagon and say, well, this is what it is, and I put it in a box, and it explains all these things, and they explain it in physical terms. Well, what about the spiritual terms? Because it is all religious writings and texts, all holy writings, are teaching things about the spirit of mankind, the spiritual condition of mankind. They're not talking about history. They're not talking about science. Although there is some aspects of that in there, they're talking about the spiritual condition. And when you start to understand that and you read all the various holy books, you realize it's the same thing over and over and over again every 1,000 years or so. Why is that? To get it through our heads that we have to grow up and mature. And when we start to do that, we find that the world takes on a whole different appearance, a different attitude, a whole way of thinking, interaction. We're caught up right now in a world of materialism to such a point that whoever has the most gold at the end of their life wins, whatever. What do they win? You can't take it with you. Well, I have the accomplishment that I had all these billions of dollars or even trillions of dollars. And I did that all by myself. Good for me, right? That's not the point. You missed it. It's like when you're in the womb of the mother, you're developing arms, legs, a head, eyes, ears, mouth, nose, etc., and you have no idea what they're for. Even if you could think, you would not know what they're for. In this physical life, we're going through the same matrix of the womb, but in a physical form where we're now experiencing the things around us. And we're learning those things around us, and we interact with one another. And how we interact and how we display what we call the spiritual qualities or virtues between each other determines our spiritual condition and our progress in the afterlife. Again, if you look at the spectrum and you got this little sliver of color, the physical life that we're in is like that physical sliver of light. There's a pre-existence, there's an after-existence, but it's a continuum. Life is a continuum. And what appeared before is infinite. What appears in this sliver of physical reality is temporal, very, very finite. What appears after it is infinite. So the reality is life is infinite. And therefore, we must establish and learn during this lifetime, which is 75, maybe 100 years if we're lucky, to learn all that we can and to be good and decent people. That doesn't mean you go out and start committing a war against another nation, which is what Russia and doing it with the Ukraine and all of the other wars that have happened since then. It doesn't mean that you go out and make so much money that you create a poverty in one portion of society that cannot even feed themselves, cannot even put shelter over themselves. And the only thing they can do is to congregate in a group on the side of a street and sleep under shelters, or, you know, maybe get into stealing or doing drugs and all that shit. Up in Vancouver, that's an epidemic. And it's the same I know down in the States. But in Vancouver, we got one of the poorest districts right downtown. And it's atrocious. And people are dying left, right, and center from drug overdose and all the rest of it. And you feel sorry for them, and you can only do just so much. It then becomes a point, what can be done either provincially or nationally to solve this problem? This is a moral problem that's going on, besides a physical problem. So, throughout the books that I write, I keep refocusing people back onto this aspect of following a moral compass. And by doing that, you're going to move forward. But I also dwell on things like, what does science do about it? What is the military doing about it? What is their agenda? What are they up to? What is the corporate wealthy elite doing? And a lot of what they're like, the wealthy corporate elite, there are people in the know who know about extraterrestrial life, and they know it's real, and they know they're coming here, and they're grabbing the technology, and they're utilizing it for their own purposes, as well as maybe setting up their own military who have these highly advanced craft and weaponry and whatever other science that goes with it. And in volume 2, I discussed that, about the aspect of cloning and hybridization and how long it's been going on. And it's surprising, but cloning has been going on for at least a few thousand years, not in the same manner that we are doing it, but it's been happening.
I want to dive down that with you. Unfortunately, I've got a hard out today, so actually I've just got one more question for you, and then I'm going to invite you back on because we're definitely going to have to go through this. But guys, in the meantime, check the show notes, of course, all the ways to find him, his incredible book series, which, I mean, what we're talking about here, there's so much information that you have just laid out for us here and that you and I have been discussing, and this is a fraction of what you cover in your book. So the way that you connect everything together is something I absolutely find so fascinating and respect about you and your work. And it's just incredible to see you tie so many topics together and to look at it through such a large lens rather than strictly this specific one and you held there, and that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have such like I said, just a wide variety of interests that you have that you place into these. And it's such an incredible reference. It's almost like I can't wait for for the technology to be there, I guess. For this to be in like tablet form, like the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Don't Panic book, and you can open it and you could say something and it would pull up a part of this based on like a reference, and it would just find it for you real quick and just tell you, and show the pictures that you have, because you have incredible pictures, and these are, I mean, textbooks. That's there's no other way to put it. I mean, they're hundreds of pages each. There's textbooks. There's 6 of them. They're massive. I mean, this is what they'll be teaching in the Space Force up in the capsule there for all the kids that are born up there. They'll have these. And so here's something that I definitely wanted to make sure that I got your opinion on before we wrap here for this time. But again, I'm definitely going to be inviting you back, man. There's way too much to cover here. Okay, so we had spoken earlier about that we're kind of a quarantined species on this planet. Now, one of the most terrifying things to me spiritually is to think of this place as a prison planet, meaning that your soul can die here, go to the Archon moon, the moon trap, and we've all heard about that. It's probably in your book. And you then recycle here until you figure something out. Maybe that's what reincarnation is and all of these things. But what terrifies me is that we're stuck because of the representation that we have around us, right? Now, the question I have for you is, if there is a galactic federation out there where there seems to be evidence that there's something going on out here where there's multiple different entities, or one entity posing as multiple different entities, and to be fair, and perhaps, there's some way that we can join that, and perhaps some humans in the past have. So the question to you would be, do you think that there's a possibility of what they refer to as a secret space program, but more I refer to as like a breakaway civilization, to where it's not a representative of the U.S. government that's out there kicking in doors and flipping over lizard tables? What it is it's more of a selected group of humans who have just figured it out and gotten their shit together, for a better term, and they basically get selected to go, and maybe there's something to that. So that's my question for you. Do you think that kind of the fate of all of humanity and what we see in our world, the people destroying stuff and the calamity and all of that, it doesn't necessarily represent all of us. And I think that aliens or extraterrestrial non-human intelligences would have some sort of delineation to be able to see that because they interact with us on such a personal and subjective basis. So that's a question, man. What do you think? Breakaway civilization? What do you think?
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I kind of figured that out for myself. I know Richard Dolan speaks about this as a breakaway civilization, and he may have been the first one to have come out and stated it publicly, but there were a lot of people who were thinking about that situation, probably even back in the late 60s, early 70s. And because if they were reverse engineering alien technology, particularly from the spacecraft that crashed or was shot down, that they would have made some leaps forward. You also have to understand that humanity is very bright and inventive and able to figure things out for themselves by trial and error. And even before we were, say, being visited by ETs, the French were developing disc-shaped craft, though they never flew, although I thought they had one that looked like it had an outer ring that was rotating around very fast. And they said, well, it was just a wooden mock-up. And I'm thinking, well, if that's wood, that's pretty amazing, because this thing was going so fast. It's like looking at a record player and having a strobe light and adjusting the RPMs on it to get the thing to look like it's standing still, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've got photographs of that. And even the Canadians were building disc-shaped type craft, the APRO program, and what they call Spark. I think it's SPAR or something. Spark, SPAR. That was it. Where they were developing spacecraft that were jet powered, not just the hovercraft type of design, the APRO cars, they said, that was sponsored by the Americans. That was a rudimentary prototype, proof of concept. And they did work out the bugs on that, by the way. They said it couldn't be stabilized. No, they stabilized that. And you can see it whipping over the terrain. So that proved that they worked it out. They had other craft that were spade shaped, right? And what they thought that was shot down in Roswell, one of these things was spade shape. Was a Canadian built? I don't know. I really don't know. But we're looking at a time frame just after in the early 50s. By the early 50s, research on electrogravitics and anti-gravitational devices had been figured out. They made the breakthrough. And that meant that now they could build a craft that had no moving parts on it, that basically they turn on the engine, this thing would come up. They could hover and do. The thing is, it's like saying, like the old commercials, is it real or is it Memorex? Memorex being that it sounds the same, it must be real, but in fact it was recorded. It's the same thing with the craft. It looked like it could do some of the things that extraterrestrial craft could do, but it was man-made. And so the UAP, which we brought up earlier in the beginning, is man-made secret covert technology. And so what the Navy is engaging in, they don't know that this is their own technology and that it's flying all over the place. And it isn't necessarily piloted by humans. It's piloted by programmable life forms, which again, I speak about this in one of the books. And these are beings that are, for want of a better word, are cybernetic, that they have a computer-like type brain, and somebody like they sitting at a control panel, as they would control a drone flying over in the air, they could do the same thing with these beings. And that these beings will go out and do all kinds of things, including abduction of humans, which now says, oh, what are we dealing with here? Is it ET or is it made? Is it a programmable life form? So I throw that monkey wrench in there and saying, you know, there's evidence not only for one side, but it's evidence for the other side that these things are programmable. So do we have a breakaway society? Yes, we do. We are at the current stage of development on this planet. We're about a 0.7475. We're not even a type 1 civilization yet. But the secret breakaway society, which is made of military intelligence, maybe even some politicians and some wealthy people, have been wealthy are supplying the money, and then the scientists are working to create all these things from the alien technology. And the whole point here is we're still dealing with nuts and bolts for the most part. And so if you see something flying over and it looks like nuts and bolts, it's probably man-made. If it's flying over and you can't see any seams on it, it looks like a ball of plasma or light or fluorescent light, that's probably ET. Why is that? Because it's safe for them to fly in that condition, which is an out-of-phase condition between physical reality and another dimension. And so when they pop through what they call a porthole, it's not a porthole. It is a phasing out of one reality into another reality, which forms what looks like a round ring or a portal. And when they go through it, boom, they're gone. The portal collapses. At least the area of space collapses. When you see it flying there in the sky, it's not physically there, it's bleeding through. And so we can see a physical outline of that craft. That's interdimensionality. This is the science they're now trying to crack. And they're very close to doing that. Dr. Greer has seen in an underground facility that he had an opportunity to go into medical procedures where they can regrow a severed limb that had been lost during the war or whatever and grow it back to its normal functional use. And he says they're using some form of, like, you know what Kirlian photography is?
Yeah,
that is
picture your aura.
Pardon me?
Oh, they could take a picture of your aura? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an aura, but if you cut a leaf off,
Leaves, yeah,
you can still see the other end of the leaf that's no longer there.
Yeah, the energetic imprint
That's
remains.
right. And it's the same with humans, and it's the same with any life form, because the energy is still there. And so you then have to start realizing we really are just energy, and we have this physical structure to contain the energy. And I wouldn't even say contain, but associated.
Yeah.
It's associated. It's like a reflection in the mirror. We're not in the mirror, but we see the reflection. You break the mirror, has the image died and gone away, or is it still existing?
Yeah.
Right? Is the cat in the box dead or not dead? That's Schrodinger's cat.
Yes,
That's the same premise. So the thing is, once you start to understand that there's a technology involved in this, and that this society has broken away and developed its own spacecraft using alien technology, has probably gone to the moon, may have set up bases, may have gone to Mars and set up some bases there as well. And it becomes so wild and outlandish. Who do you start believing? Very good has said, I spent 20 years as one of these paratroopers or covert troopers on Mars for 20 years and flying spaceships. And then when I left the service, they brainwashed me and I lost all the memory, and it's only just starting to come back to me. How do you prove that? You haven't got any provable evidence. If he said, go to coordinates such and such in Mars and photograph that area, or pick out the photographs that have been taken up there, you'll see the base there, then I would start to believe that. Or I can tell you where the spaceships are out in space, and they're off at a certain range, and they'll have this shape and configuration. I've heard these stories where there's 4,000 to 5,000 men on board one ship that is like an aircraft carrier out in space. And basically they live there, and every once in a while they get supplies coming in from Earth to restock that ship. And that ship is probably about a mile or two in size. That's how large these things are. I've had a remote view where I thought I saw one, and it was a very odd shape. It reminded me of a key with a round sort of round at one end and sort of a angled off on the other end. And I saw it momentarily, and then it kind of disappeared. I wasn't meant to see it.
Yeah, you
but
hear
I
this.
did see it.
Yeah, you hear this. You're not allowed, or you'll get blocked. Area 51. A lot of people are trying to remote
I
view
know that I've been blocked in some of my remote view.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to break through that. And Greer has mentioned that sometimes they'll block you if you're getting too close. I've seen things on one of the moons of Saturn, Iapetus. And Iapetus is a funny looking moon. It has a large ridge that runs equatorial, and it has light and dark, and it has actually a geometric form. It's a polygon. And one thing they didn't tell you is it has a tower on the southern hemisphere. And I remote viewed that 8 years before Cassini found it.
Who built the tower?
Yeah, hang on a sec. I just want to block that. So that's what remote viewing can do. I saw into the future, and I saw at a distance, and I saw the NASA photograph that confirmed what I saw. So the thing is, we're entering an amazing time where if consciousness is developed into a science, we're going to be incredibly different types of human being on this surface. We have to develop a hive mentality, because the ants and the bees have it, and the birds have it, and other animals have it. Humans don't have that yet. We are not able to function as a unit.
Do you think we could retain that without a hive mentality and retain our independence?
Yes, we can. But it's like saying we'll all be on the same page.
Right.
One person may be reading at the top of the page, another person in the middle, and another person at the bottom of the page, but we're all on the same page.
But like everyone has a clear definition of cruelty and what that means, and we're all not on board with it.
Yeah, and we have an understanding of war and the damage it does to us, right, both physically and after the aftermath of it all. The thing is, when you get into a type 1 civilization, which is where you get these incredible technologies that are traveling at the speed of light or faster, being able to manipulate your environment to such a degree that you create something that perhaps wasn't meant or hasn't been seen before for the first time. Incredible breakthroughs in medicine, breakthroughs in archaeological understanding, where we came from, understanding the different bioforms of life that is out in space and now is starting to show up. I've had contact with different types of ET. I actually have ETs that show up in the house and hang around here for a little while, and then they take off. And they're like a ball of light. And my wife has seen it. I've seen it. I've got my backyard camera that records some of this stuff, where it comes right out through the wall and goes around the backyard and comes back towards the house. All kinds of things. Why is that? Because they know that this is a safe home. And I told them, this is a safe place. If you want to come here, you can come here. And you can spend whatever amount of time. What I would like is the opportunity to communicate with you. I don't want anything from you. I just want your time, your communication.
You're like, let's just have a chat, guys, and you're welcome to come hang out, because obviously, you're going to do it either way. But it's fascinating, man. Your perspective is so interesting, and I love it. I love your work.
Because it's not the usual perspective that most ufologists have. My books give you the big picture, not the little picture, the big picture.
Yeah, and all of it, guys. The Citizens Disclosure on UFOs and ETI are going to be located down in the show notes. Make sure that you guys check this link. I'm going to throw your Facebook in there as well. And you guys reach out, because Terry obviously has some fascinating things to say. And I just can't wait to hear more from you, man.
This is how thick it is.
Jesus. See, yeah. I mean, and that's great...
840 pages.
And that's one of the 6 volumes. It's fascinating, guys. Right. They're back there. They take up the whole shelf practically. So, Terry Tibando, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been absolutely incredible. Like there is so many more things that we're going to talk about. And so let's do this. I'm going to invite you back very soon. We'll do a quick turnaround on this. And man, I'm super pumped because this has been incredible. So Terry, I can't thank you enough. You're invited back, of course, brother. And thank you.
You're very welcome. And just before we depart, my books are only available online. That means that you would go to your favorite bookstore, whether it's Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or others like Hudson in the States, or if you're in Canada, it would be Chapters on Indigo. And basically, you go online, you look for the title, A Citizen's Disclosure on UFOs and ETI, and you should see all 6 volumes. And what you can do, they are expensive. They're like a university textbook. Each book, the first one in particular, is like getting 3 books in one. That's how voluminous this writing is. And there's 6 books like that. And full of pictures, references. You can see where I got the information from. And you're going to pay a little bit more than you normally would, but I guarantee you, once you have this, and I've had people down in the States who bought this book. I've had one fellow who said, this is a tour de force. I've never seen anything like this. He says, you should be teaching this in university. I've approached the universities. They said, it's so massive, we don't know where to even begin and who would teach it. And I said, I'll teach it.
Yeah, you have the curriculum. You have the professor. He wrote the book. I mean, all professors write their own textbooks, right? But I mean,
Exactly.
And you've done it. That's what's cool. You may have paid it forward on that, or you went ahead and wrote the book. It's one of those, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I sold them in the States. I sold them in Canada. I sold them in Britain. I sold some in Germany. I sent one to Japan and one down to Israel. I'm trying to get it out. Even if I don't make any money whatsoever, I want the information out there, because one of the things we didn't touch on, and I'll just say this very quickly, there is so much error in the UFO database that it has to be corrected. And it may mean tossing some of the information out altogether, because it's rather spacious or specious. And that's what I discovered. I had to toss out some of my old thinking based on what I had traditionally known and learned about, and realized when I delved into it, this was not the information I was getting from it.
The name of the game here. We do that every single episode, and you've helped a lot of people do that with this information today. So thank you again, my friend. This is incredible.
Brandon, it's my pleasure, and I look forward to doing this again with you.
I want to send a huge shout out to that man responsible for that massive volume of absolutely incredible information, Terry Tibando. Dude, you're welcome back anytime. We got so many more things to talk about, so you will be invited back very shortly. Check out A Citizen's Disclosure on UFOs and ETI. That link is located down in the show notes so that you guys can check out this amazing compendium of information. And thank you again, Terry. That's outstanding. Now, while you guys are down in the show notes, check out our affiliate links as well. We have Food Forest Abundance, Get Your Freedom from Fear On. We have Opus, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. Now, also, if you want to start your own podcast, there's a link down there that reads, Start Your Own Podcast. We partner with Red Circle, and that's highly what I recommend you to do. That's the link that'll get you going there. Also, while you're down there, if you want to step your game up in general, take Dewey Taylor up on his offer over there at the Manifestor's Guide. Type Expanding Reality, all caps, no spaces at checkout, and he even sweetens the deal on top of that. Now, also, while you guys are down in the show notes, check our mothership. This is where everything's at, and that is expandingrealitypodcast.com. It's where it's all happening. That's also the same place that you can sign up to become an Expansive Insider and support the show while also taking advantage of all the bonus content going on over there, and it's going off. Also, this is a value for value system, so if you guys find this valuable, we always encourage everyone to check the link down there that reads Support the Mission, and that is how you can support your favorite show in one of the most important ways that it can be done. We do live in a 3D reality where shit like that's got to go down. That's how you do it, and I'm absolutely grateful for everyone for participating in that. It means way, way more than you know. So guys, go out into this incredibly beautiful place and y'all pick up a piece of litter. You know, be open-minded, be nice to everybody that you come across. Let's find some new ideas out there and entertain them for more than a, nah, fuck that. You know, give it that breath. Give it that, let's see what's going on here, maybe. And then also, while you're doing all of that stuff, all of that can be contemplated in the not left-hand lane if that's where you'd prefer to drive. If you've got someone behind you that would like to get there a little quicker, just move on over, contemplate those things off to the side, and then they'll be right by you. And that is how you raise the vibe. Absolutely 100%, especially for that person behind you. But above all and anything else, go out into this beautiful place, guys, whatever the hell this thing is, and y'all be good to one another. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, engaging, and all of that. We'll see you next time.